The gym was empty, except for the squeak of a mop and the sound of a door unlocking. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting long, pale shadows across the mats. It was well past closing time at the most prestigious martial arts gym in Boston. Outside, the streets were slick with rain, but inside, everything was quiet, except for one man. James Washington moved with measured calm, pushing the mop across the mat like a craftsman polishing glass. Mid-50s, lean but sturdy, his faded gray hoodie hung loose on his frame. Every motion he made was deliberate. The way he turned the mop at sharp angles, the way he straightened the corners of towels on the bench, the way he paused between tasks, not because he was tired, but because he respected the space. To most, he was just the night janitor. But if anyone had watched closely, they would have noticed something different. The way he walked, heels light, center balanced. The way his gaze swept the room, not lazily, but like a fighter scanning an arena. Even the way he folded towels echoed discipline, folding each one into a perfect square like a black belt tying a GI. Across the gym, a faint thud broke the silence. Sarah Chun was still practicing. 17, shy but determined, she stood barefoot on the corner mat. Her small frame hid surprising power. She drilled her side kicks again and again, her breath short but focused. She always stayed a little later than everyone else, not to show off, but to improve. When she paused for water, she noticed James. He didn't speak, but there was something calming about the way he worked. She offered a polite nod. "Good night, Mr. Washington," she said softly. He returned the nod with a faint smile. "Good night, Sarah. That was all." He preferred it that way. Quiet, unnoticed, invisible. But invisibility never lasts. The glass door creaked open, letting in a rush of cold air. Loud footsteps echoed through the hallway. Derek Mitchell strode in, dripping confidence like sweat after a match. Black belt tied loose around his waist, hair perfectly styled, expensive jacket thrown over his shoulder. He was 28, decorated in tournaments, the star instructor of the gym. And he knew it. "Forgot my gloves," he muttered to himself, heading toward the locker room. But then he stopped. On the mat, under the dim lights, stood James with his mop. Derek tilted his head, amused. A smirk curled on his lips. "Well, well," he muttered loud enough for it to carry. "Didn't know the cleaning crew got mat time." James kept mopping, unfazed. Derek stepped closer, circling the edge of the mat like a showman testing the waters. "You always clean like you're preparing for a tournament, old man?" Sarah glanced nervously between them. She respected Derek's skill, but she hated when he got like this, loud, mocking, hungry for attention. James simply wrung out the mop, set it back down, and continued his pattern across the floor. He didn't rise to it. That only made Derek lean in more. He whistled low. "You know, most people just mop. You, though, you've got that posture. It's almost cute. Still nothing." The locker door slammed open. A few students began trickling back in, late-night stragglers, excited for an extra round of sparring. Their chatter filled the air, but it quieted when they noticed Derek watching the janitor. The smirk on his face promised entertainment. James finished the row he was working on and turned the bucket slightly, adjusting his angle with the precision of someone lining up for a match. He wasn't looking at Derek, but he didn't have to. His stillness alone was unsettling. Sarah stepped forward, trying to diffuse the brewing tension. Derek, he's just finishing up. We can wait until he's—" Derek raised a hand, cutting her off without looking away from James. "Relax, Sarah. I'm just having some fun." The students gathered near the benches, sensing something was about to happen. James felt their eyes on him. He'd spent weeks in this gym, blending into the background, becoming part of the walls. He liked it that way. No attention, no questions, no past. But moments like this, he knew them too well. He lowered the mop into the bucket slowly, water rippling in tight circles. Derek's grin widened. His voice rose, sharp and theatrical, echoing off the walls. "Hey, old man, ever mop up after a real fight?" The words cut through the room like a blade. The students froze mid-step. Sarah's stomach sank. James's hands tightened around the mop handle, not in fear, but in quiet calculation. He looked up for the first time, eyes steady, unreadable. Derek's smirk didn't falter. In fact, he enjoyed the silence. He wanted the reaction. One by one, the students turned toward the mat, gathering like an audience before the opening act of a show they didn't know would change everything. The rain beat harder against the windows. Inside, tension thickened like the air before a storm. And for the first time that night, James Washington wasn't invisible anymore. Everyone turned as Derek tossed his bag aside and stepped barefoot onto the mat. The thud echoed, breaking the fragile quiet like a starter gun. His jacket hit the bench, his black belt hung loose, and that signature grin, half showman, half predator, spread across his face. "Well," he said loudly, eyes locked on James. "Since the janitor's already on the mat, might as well give him some pointers, right?" A few of the younger students chuckled nervously. Derek's presence always had this effect. He wasn't just a black belt. He was the star of the gym. Competitions, trophies, sponsorship deals. His photo was on the wall. To them, he was untouchable. James didn't respond. He simply kept wiping a section near the edge, focused, as if Derek's voice were nothing more than background noise. Derek walked in a slow circle, hands clasped behind his back. "Don't tell me you've never sparred before, old man. You move that mop like it's a sword." More laughter. Not cruel, but curious. The kind that came from people who wanted to see what would happen. Sarah shifted uncomfortably near the corner. She respected Derek's talent, but she hated this side of him. The showboating, the need to be worshipped. She glanced at James, silently hoping he'd just finish and walk away. James straightened up briefly. "I'm just here to clean," he said calmly, his voice low but firm. "It's late. You should lock up." Derek pounced on that. "Oh, hear that?" he said, turning to the crowd. "He's just here to clean. No fun in him at all." He gave James a theatrical shrug. "Come on, man. Just a little friendly spar. No pressure. I'll go easy on you." James shook his head. "No, thank you." The refusal wasn't loud, but it hung in the air like a challenge in itself. Derek's grin faltered for a split second, then grew wider, more dangerous. He turned to the students. "You hear that?" "He's scared." Whispers broke out. A few phones appeared, tilted casually as if no one would notice. The gym suddenly felt smaller, the walls closer. Sarah stepped forward. "Derek, stop," she said gently. "He's just—" "Relax, Sarah," Derek cut in, never taking his eyes off James. "I'm not bullying him. I'm giving him a chance to play with the big boys." He took a step closer. "Or maybe," he lowered his voice theatrically, "he just doesn't want everyone to see how fast I'd knock him down." A ripple of nervous laughter passed through the students. It wasn't all malicious. Some were just caught up in the show. James leaned his mop against the wall, but only to wring it out. He wasn't accepting the invitation. He wasn't interested. But his calm refusal only seemed to fuel Derek more. Derek tilted his head. "You know, I used to respect guys like you," he said, voice dripping with mock sincerity. "Working hard, cleaning up after everyone. But if you're on the mat, man, you gotta know the rules." James met his gaze finally. His expression was unreadable, like still water hiding a current beneath. "I'm not here to fight you," he said. "Finish what you came for and let me work." For a moment, the air grew heavy. Derek blinked, thrown off by the quiet firmness in James's voice. But his ego refused to back down. He clapped his hands loudly. "All right, everybody," he called out, pacing like a ring announcer. "We got a man here who thinks he can just stroll onto the mat and say no to a black belt. Let's see how long that lasts." Phones were up now. A loose circle began to form, instinctively, students drawn by the scent of drama. A few exchanged eager looks, as if they were about to witness something worth talking about for weeks. Sarah shook her head. "This isn't right," she whispered to no one in particular. But no one moved to stop it. Derek leaned his shoulder against the wall casually, like a lion waiting for its prey to step forward. "What's it gonna be, old man? A friendly round? Or are you too tired from all that?" "Mopping?" James exhaled slowly. His discomfort wasn't fear. It was something deeper. Frustration. He'd worked hard to stay invisible. The taunts turned personal. And that's when something inside James shifted. Derek circled him like a wolf testing a fence, every word sharper than the last. "Come on, man. Look at you," he sneered. Gray hair, hunched shoulders, scrubbing floors at midnight. "Shouldn't you be at home watching TV with a cup of warm milk?" Laughter rippled through the group. Not all of it was cruel. Some laughed out of discomfort, unsure where the line was anymore. But Derek didn't stop. He could smell the crowd's attention like blood in the water. He walked around James slowly, his bare feet whispering against the mat. "You know what's funny? Guys like you always have this serious look, like you used to matter or something. But here you are, a janitor." He spat the last word like it was dirt on his tongue. Sarah stepped in nervously. "Derek, that's enough. Seriously." He swung his head toward her, grinning. "Oh, Sarah, I get it. You've got a soft spot for the old cleaner. What's next?" "You're gonna ask him to teach you how to fold towels." Her cheeks flushed with anger. "You're being a jerk." "And you're idolizing some guy with a mop," Derek shot back, loud enough for everyone to hear. His friends snickered. The circle around them grew tighter. Phones were out now, steady hands filming what they thought was the prelude to a beatdown. Through it all, James remained silent. His posture didn't change. His hands rested lightly on the mop handle. But his eyes hardened. They were no longer the calm, distant eyes of a quiet worker. Something deeper flickered behind them, like a storm gathering behind still clouds. Derek noticed the stare and leaned in closer. "What, did I hit a nerve?" he whispered. "Or do you just not understand English that well, old-timer?" That line earned a few gasps. Even some of Derek's usual supporters shifted uneasily. It was too far, but he didn't care. He wanted a reaction. James looked away briefly toward the exit. For a moment, there was a chance he'd walk. A small, fragile hope that the tension would break and the night would go back to normal. But before he could step back, the gym lights seemed to dim around him, not literally, but in his mind. A flicker, a roar of a crowd, the metallic clang of a cage door, hot lights pouring down on sweat-slick mats. A younger James, muscular, focused, eyes burning, stood in a cage, gloves raised. A referee held his wrist up. The crowd chanted a single name. "Silent Storm! Silent Storm!" His breath caught. The flash was brief but powerful. A life he'd buried clawed its way up through the silence. He exhaled sharply and blinked. He was back in the gym. Derek was still talking. "What's the matter, janitor? Too slow to keep up? Maybe I should get you a chair so you can sit down before you fall over." The group erupted again, feeding off his performance. Sarah stepped closer to James, her voice low. "You don't have to prove anything," she whispered. He gave her a small nod, not in agreement, but acknowledgement. Then he turned slightly, mop in hand, starting to walk toward the edge of the mat. For a split second, it looked like he was going to leave. That was the out. Derek could have let it end there, but he didn't. As James stepped past him, Derek reached out and gave him a light shove on the shoulder. Not a hard hit, just a teasing push, playful enough to claim innocence, but disrespectful enough to draw blood. "Oops," Derek said with a grin. "My bad. Guess you're not as steady as I thought." The mop bucket sloshed. James stopped mid-step. The gym froze. His hand slowly released the mop. The wooden handle rolled gently against the wall and came to rest with a soft click. He turned back toward Derek. Their eyes met. No bravado. No raised voice. Just an intensity that made Derek's smirk falter for a fraction of a second. James stepped closer, his voice low and calm, almost too calm. "If I accept," he said slowly, "you'll apologize when it's done." The words hit the air like a hammer striking a bell. The students exchanged stunned glances. Sarah's eyes widened. Derek blinked, confused, then laughed loudly to cover the sudden knot in his stomach. "Oh, this is gonna be good," someone whispered from the back. The gym went silent again, the kind of silence that comes right before a storm hits. As James stepped onto the mat, his movements changed, controlled, precise, terrifyingly calm. The mop was no longer in his hands. In its place was something older, deeper, a silent authority that filled the room like air pressure before a storm. James moved to the center of the mat without saying a word. His steps were measured, balanced, like a man who'd done this thousands of times. Derek laughed, loud and mocking, trying to reclaim control. "All right, old man. You want a little spar? Fine. Just don't break a hip out here." James stood facing him. His face was unreadable. "One condition," he said evenly. "When it's done, you apologize." The students exchanged curious glances. Derek rolled his eyes and waved a dismissive hand. Yeah, sure. Whatever helps you sleep tonight." They bowed. At least, James did. Derek gave a sloppy half-bow and immediately bounced on his heels, shadowboxing like he was performing for the crowd. His energy was brash, loud. James's energy was the opposite. Silent, controlled, a coiled spring. Then he shifted into his stance. It wasn't the clumsy posture of a hobbyist or the stiff guard of a novice. It was smooth, natural, like muscle memory forged in fire. His feet aligned perfectly, hands loose but ready, eyes locked onto Derek with surgical focus. The gym changed in that moment. Conversations hushed. A few students leaned forward, sensing something they didn't fully understand. Sarah's eyes narrowed. She'd spent years watching black belts move. But James moved differently. She slowly backed toward the bench, pulled out her phone and typed quickly. "James Washington, Boston Martial Arts Silent Storm." The results loaded in seconds. Her eyes widened. Silent Storm Washington, the undefeated underground legend. Boston's Silent Storm retires. Unexpectedly, after 32 Tendero record. James Silent Storm. Washington, the man who never spoke in the cage. Her heart pounded. She scrolled through old fight posters, the same steady eyes staring out from beneath a younger man's brow. It was him. "No doubt. Oh my God," she whispered. She glanced up. Derek hadn't noticed her reaction yet, but the students next to her peeked at her screen. Whispers began to spread like wildfire. "Wait, that's him? No way. Holy, he's a legend. My dad used to talk about this guy." The murmur grew, subtle at first, then unmistakable. Heads turned, eyes fixed on James with a new kind of respect. And fear. Derek frowned, sensing the shift. "What's going on?" he asked one of the students. They shrugged awkwardly, but their gaze didn't leave James. James inhaled deeply, slowly. Each breath pulled the noise out of the room. He centered himself, body still, mind razor-sharp. Years of discipline clicked back into place like a lock turning. For the first time, Derek hesitated. Just for a second, he tried to cover it up with bravado. "You all acting weird for nothing," he said with a forced laugh. "Guys, just stretching or whatever. Let's do this." But his eyes betrayed him. He saw how James's stance didn't budge, how his gaze didn't flinch. It wasn't the look of someone stepping out of their comfort zone. It was the look of someone stepping back into their element. Sarah's fingers tightened around her phone. She didn't want to interrupt, but the realization burned in her chest. This wasn't just a janitor. This was Silent Storm. She leaned toward one of the younger students, her voice a harsh whisper. "Do you know who that is?" They shook their head. She turned the screen toward them. The headline gleamed under the fluorescent lights. Their jaw dropped, and just like that, the whisper spread again. Wider, faster. The crowd that had gathered to watch a joke now found themselves holding their breath. James exhaled once more, slow and steady. His focus tunneled. He didn't look at the phones. He didn't hear the whispers. All he heard was the sound of his own heartbeat, syncing with the rhythm of his breath. The Silent Storm was awake. Across from him, Derek bounced nervously, still trying to look relaxed. His grin was wide, but a tiny twitch in the corner of his mouth gave him away. He felt the pressure now. He didn't know why yet, but the room did. Sarah's voice, barely louder than a breath, cut through the silence like a bell. "Oh my God, he's that James Washington." Derek's confident grin faltered for just a split second. Two men stood across from each other, one fighting for ego, the other for respect. The air inside the gym felt different now, thicker, heavier. The students had formed a wide circle around the mat, phones up, breaths held. Every eye was locked on the two figures standing opposite each other under the dim fluorescent lights. Derek Mitchell bounced on his toes, cracking his neck, grinning like a showman about to entertain a crowd. He launched into a warm-up routine that looked more like a performance than preparation. Flashy, spinning kicks sliced through the air with sharp thwacks. He shouted little grunts with each strike, feeding off the nervous energy around him. James Washington didn't move. He stood barefoot on the mat, arms loose at his sides, back straight. His breathing was calm, deliberate, almost meditative. The contrast was striking. Derek, a storm of noise and motion. James, the eye at its center. Derek paused mid-spin and pointed at James with a cocky grin. "You sure you're ready for this, old man? Last chance to back out before I make you part of the floor you clean." James didn't blink. His voice was soft but steady. "I'll give you one last chance. Apologize. Walk away." "No harm done." A ripple of surprise went through the crowd. Derek laughed, loud and dismissive. "Apologize? To a janitor? Not a chance." James nodded slowly, as if he expected nothing less. He stepped forward, bowed deeply, a respectful, disciplined gesture honed by years of practice. Derek gave a lazy half-bow in return, his arrogance practically dripping onto the mat. Then they took their positions. A silence settled over the room. It wasn't empty. It was charged. Anticipation hung in the air like the moment before thunder. Derek struck first. With a sharp exhale, he lunged forward, launching a lightning-fast roundhouse kick aimed at James's ribs. It was powerful and clean, the kind of move that had impressed countless students before. But James wasn't there. With a single subtle step, he slid out of the kick's path, as if he'd known it was coming. His movement wasn't flashy. It was inevitable. The crowd gasped in unison. Derek landed awkwardly, thrown off by how easily his attack had been dodged. He snarled and reset. "Lucky," he muttered. He came again. A jab-cross-hook combination, fast and aggressive. James's body flowed like water. A shift of the hips, a soft parry, a half-step back, block, redirect, neutralize. Every strike Derek threw met nothing but air or the quiet resistance of James's precise defense. The sound of Derek's fists slicing through empty space echoed in the gym. Students murmured. Someone whispered, "He's toying with him." Derek's grin faltered. His breaths grew louder, heavier. He tried to mask the frustration in his face, but his eyes betrayed him. Wide, searching, unsettled. James, on the other hand, hadn't even broken rhythm. His breathing remained slow, measured. His eyes stayed locked on Derek's movements, scanning with the detached focus of a surgeon preparing for the next incision. Derek switched tactics. He spun into a jumping back kick, his signature move, the one he used to drop cocky students during demos. It was fast, precise, deadly, but it met only empty air. James shifted his weight a fraction of a second before impact, sliding past the attack like smoke through fingers. Derek's foot hit nothing. Momentum carried him too far. He stumbled forward, off balance just for a moment. But in that moment, James moved, lightning speed. No hesitation. The crowd held its breath as James stepped in, his body a blur of calm precision and explosive intent. Blackout. In less than a heartbeat, the janitor became the storm. The moment Derek stumbled, James moved with the quiet precision of a blade slicing through silk. One step in, his hand caught Derek's wrist. His other slid behind Derek's knee. And in a single fluid motion, he swept the leg and redirected the momentum. Thud. Derek hit the mat flat on his back, breath whooshing out of him. James hadn't slammed him. He'd guided him down like gravity itself had chosen sides. For a heartbeat, the gym was silent. Then came the gasps. Students leaned forward. Sarah's hand covered her mouth, eyes wide. Someone whispered, "Did you see that?" Phones zoomed in. The quiet janitor had just dismantled their star instructor in a single, effortless counter. Derek blinked at the ceiling, his chest heaving. He wasn't used to looking up at anyone from the mat. Rage flushed through his face as he scrambled up, embarrassed, trying to shake off the moment like it hadn't happened. He forced a grin. "Lucky shot," he spat, though his voice cracked just enough to betray him. James didn't respond. He simply adjusted his stance, calm, balanced, hands loose at his sides. His stillness was more threatening than any aggressive posture Derek could muster. Snarling, Derek launched forward. This time, there was no performance. His punches came harder, faster, wild edges creeping into his technique. A jab, cross, hook, sharp. But James parried each one with surgical precision. Tap. Parry. Tap. Redirect. Slip. Pivot. Each movement James made exposed something Derek didn't even realize was flawed. A shoulder left open, a foot too heavy on the wrong side, a guard dropping an inch too low. James countered not with brute force, but with pinpoint touches. A light backhand to redirect Derek's head, a gentle push to off-balance him, a sweep that never fully committed to harm. It was like watching a chess grandmaster play against someone who had only just learned the moves. The crowd began to murmur, not with mockery, but with awe. "Who is this guy?" someone breathed. Derek's frustration boiled over. He gritted his teeth and came in with a spinning kick. James ducked under effortlessly, tapping Derek's planted foot mid-spin. Derek stumbled again, catching himself at the last second. The gym erupted. Cheers, gasps, laughter. Not cruel, but amazed. For the first time, Derek wasn't the one in control, and everyone knew it. James's face remained unchanged, calm, almost meditative. He wasn't fighting to humiliate. He was fighting to teach. Each block, each slip, each perfectly placed counter was a quiet lesson in mastery, control, and respect. But Derek couldn't see it. All he saw was the circle of students, their eyes no longer filled with admiration for him. He roared, charging again. His strikes grew sloppier, his breath heavier. He abandoned the rhythm of martial arts and resorted to raw aggression. James stepped aside, letting Derek's punch sail through empty air. A subtle turn of his hip and a light tap on Derek's back sent him stumbling forward again. Sarah whispered, almost to herself, "He's not even trying to hurt him." The respect in the room shifted completely. Phones lowered, eyes sharpened. This was no longer a spectacle. It was a revelation. James stepped back slowly, lowering his hands. His breathing stayed steady, controlled. He fixed Derek with a calm gaze. Not angry, not smug. Just steady. "Last chance," he said quietly. The words hung in the air, heavier than any punch. Derek's chest heaved. His pride burned hotter than his bruises. Around him, the room had changed. And he felt it. Their admiration slipping, his image cracking. With a furious roar, Derek, for the first time in years, James unleashed his true speed. Derek came charging like a bull, every ounce of pride and desperation driving him forward. His fists flew wildly, his legs lashed out with frantic kicks, all power, no precision. But James had already read him like a book. He stepped in, not back. His body moved with the fluidity of water meeting rock. A slip here, a pivot there. Each of Derek's strikes met nothing but empty air or the quiet resistance of a perfectly timed parry. The rhythm changed. James's movements, once restrained and measured, began to sharpen. It was subtle at first, a tighter slip, a faster pivot. Then, like a dam breaking, the full force of his long-buried instincts poured out. He sidestepped. A jab, ducked under a hook, and in one breathtaking sequence swept Derek's leg mid-spin while guiding his upper body down with a perfectly placed arm. The sound of Derek hitting the mat this time was final. Thud. James flowed into the pin like it was muscle memory. Because it was. In one seamless motion, he trapped Derek's arm, shifted his weight, and immobilized him with effortless control. It wasn't brutal. It was clean, technical, masterful. The gym went utterly silent. No cheers, no gasps, just silence. The kind of silence that comes when people witness something they know they'll never forget. Derek's chest heaved as he lay pinned, his strength spent, his hands trembled, more from the crushing weight of realization than from James's hold. His students, the ones who had always looked at him like an untouchable figure, now stared at the quiet janitor with wide, reverent eyes. James's face remained calm, not gloating, not angry, just steady. He leaned closer, his voice low but firm. "Apologize." Derek stared up at him, sweat dripping down his temples. Pride clawed at his throat. For a second, it looked like he might resist. But then something shifted. The mocking grin was gone. The cocky sparkle had vanished. What was left was a man realizing the difference between skill and ego, between showmanship and mastery. James released the hold slowly and stood. Derek remained on his knees for a moment, breathing heavily. Then, in front of everyone, he lowered his head. "I'm sorry," he said hoarsely. James didn't respond. He simply watched. Derek turned toward the students, toward Sarah, his voice breaking. "To all of you, and to him. I disrespected someone I didn't understand." Then, in a moment no one expected, Derek bowed, deeply, to James. The room exhaled together. Sarah's eyes glistened. A few students clapped softly, not like at a show, but like they were acknowledging something sacred. James simply nodded once, then turned away. As he walked toward the corner of the mat, someone in the crowd whispered, awestruck, "Was that really?" Silent storm. James didn't answer. He just picked up his mop, dipped it back into the bucket, and quietly began cleaning again, as if the storm had never happened. By morning, the entire gym and half the city had seen the video. The shaky phone clip had spread like wildfire. First through the students' private group chats, then onto local martial arts forums, and finally across social media. By dawn, hashtags were trending. Silent Storm returns, Janitor V's black belt, respect on the mat. Clips looped endlessly, the effortless sweep, the clean takedown, the pin. Comment sections were flooded with disbelief. Some thought it was staged. Others recognized the name, James Silent Storm, Washington. Headlines resurfaced his legendary past. Old photos of a younger James, raising his fists in packed arenas, championship belts slung over his shoulder, eyes full of quiet fire. Inside the gym, the atmosphere was different, quieter, reverent. Students didn't chatter as they entered. They whispered. The once untouchable Derek now greeted everyone with a humble nod, no longer strutting with the same inflated confidence. In the center of the mat, during morning class, Derek stood in front of James. The entire gym had gathered. Phones were tucked away. Everyone watched. Derek took a deep breath. Last night, I let my ego speak louder than my respect, and I disrespected someone who didn't deserve it. His voice was steady, humble. James, thank you for teaching me a lesson without breaking me. He bowed deeply. A ripple of emotion passed through the students. Some clapped softly. Sarah smiled, pride shining in her eyes. James simply returned the bow, his expression calm, accepting, like a teacher acknowledging a student's first real step. From that day forward, James's presence in the gym shifted. He didn't become a loud instructor or take over classes. He still showed up with his bucket and mop, cleaning the mats with quiet precision. But students began gathering around him, between sessions, asking small questions, seeking advice on form, breathing, discipline. Sarah became his most attentive listener. She mimicked his stances, practiced his breathing methods, absorbed his lessons like a sponge. James never lectured. He just demonstrated, patiently, wordlessly, letting respect grow naturally. One evening, as the gym emptied, Sarah approached him alone. The lights were dim again, the same way they'd been that night. James was folding towels with the same deliberate care he folded his past. "Mr. Washington," she began softly, "can I ask you something?" He glanced up, giving a small nod. "Why did you stop fighting?" she asked. The question hung in the air. For a moment, he kept folding, as if weighing whether to answer. Then he spoke, his voice quiet but steady. "Because one night, winning cost more than it gave," he said. "I lost someone I cared about because I forgot why I started. Fighting gave me pride. But peace gave me life." Sarah swallowed, emotion tightening her throat. She nodded slowly, understanding more than words could explain. James placed the folded towel on the stack and looked at her, not with the intensity of a fighter, but the warmth of a mentor who had finally made peace with his shadow. As Sarah walked away, she glanced back to see James return to his mop, moving methodically across the mat, just as he always had. Except now, everyone who passed him saw not a janitor, but a legend who chose humility over glory. Because true strength isn't loud, it's quiet, it's humble, and it only reveals itself when it must. And for those who witnessed that night, it was a lesson they would never forget. If this story inspired you, share it. Respect is earned, not demanded.